Hello, I'm host Eric, host of Talking with Famous People, and today I'm going to be talking about an analogy to understand cognitive functions. There are a lot of models that explain how and why it is that this relates to that and this type behaves as follows and whatnot. The best way we can use to conceptualize it as a simple whole that has good effective meaning is through a variety of analogies, I think. This is one such analogy. And it breaks down cognitive functions to paths. You view life as paths. You've got possible, ideal, fair, concrete, popular, precious, walking, and mapping. So, if your focus is foremost on viewing all the possible paths, and then evaluating them in terms of fairness, which means basically consistency, then you're an ENTP. Now, if you then follow up with, well, which ones are popular, you're an ENTP. And then mapping where you've gone, mapping your plans and stuff. That's SI. So, what am I not going to be good at? Well, look, I can see all the possible paths. I know I can see and balance them against one another effectively, according to fair criteria. I can, if you present to me, hey, look at this path. You know considerably less than I do, probably, unless you're another ENTP, about whether or not it can withstand scrutiny given all the other possibilities in the universe that we can think of. And generally speaking, I think it's fair to say that in such a context, ENTPs can think of the most possibilities. It makes it a challenge for other types to bring ideas before ENTPs, and we can be a little bit dismissive of them, and we can be a little bit uncaring in our crushing of dreams, I guess. And I'm sorry about that, to the extent that I do it. I try to be fair and that, but also mindful a little bit of the fact that people tend to be. Well, let's keep moving. So, let's say on the other hand, so this is the order of operations for me as far as I see it, and that's what socionics and MBTI kind of disagree with is what's the order of operations. MBTI will tell you it goes possible paths, fair paths, popular paths, mapping the paths, then ideal paths, then concrete paths, then which is basically concretizing paths, like saying, well, let's take this general path over there and turn it into a series of specific steps we're going to take to actually walk the path. And then the next one is precious paths, and the last one is actually walking the path itself. So, because I prioritize seeing all the possible paths, I can eventually get very good at getting a sense of what the ideal path would be like. But I'm a possible path person because I don't start making a song by saying, okay, now I know what I want this to be. I know the song, I know the melody. I start by laying down a beat and then come up with a bunch of ideas. Just start playing the guitar over it and or singing or whatever. And then I'll go back and identify the good parts and go, oh, that's what the ideal looks like. Oh, okay. But I still have to have pretty good eye to recognize that and be right. Sometimes, if you don't have it developed at all, it's hard to tell. Sometimes, even if you do have it developed pretty well, like I think I do for music anyway, for my own music. And again, I want to stress this. When I'm talking about using NI to know what's good in my own music, I'm saying compared to what's bad in my own music. I'm not making any claims about it being better than some other person's music, okay? I don't know about that. I don't like to talk about that or think about that because what I do know is good enough, which is there's difference between my good stuff and my bad stuff according to me, and that tends to correlate with a truth that's outside of me in some sense, and that's what I want to seek. Now let's look to the next one. Because I second look to consistency between paths, in other words, check for logic stuff, then it's natural that I'm going to be also next being aware of, on the flip side of that, uh, what a concrete path is actually going to boil down to. So, the difference between TE and TI is TINE sees possible paths and checks them to see if they're logically consistent with things unrelated to the path sometimes, but related to whether or not we ought to travel a given path anyway. So in that instance, it's a little less attentive to the concrete details of the path, whereas TE is one that's going to say that's not practical. That's not actually a path, Eric, not a realistic path. Which is why to be really strong at possible paths combined with fair paths, checking for consistency, means to be able to understand all the negative space of TE very well. This is why shit won't work, is implicit in knowing, using TI to adjudicate your set of possible options. And thus, we get very strong at TE. I'd say stronger than we do at NI because successfully doing NE can be isolated from the NI process. Whereas successfully doing TI requires you to have a stronger understanding of TE. I think it's because it's a judging function, probably, not a perceiving function. So we've got this thing where we go, basically, know the possible paths, and then TI kind of takes a back seat depending on what you're doing. Like TI is always active there, referencing for me stuff not to do for certain reasons. So I'm making a song, for example. I like to use this example because it's kind of politically neutral, you know. I will note to myself, no, don't put lyrics like that because it will reference this other thing too much, and then it'll evoke this line of thinking which I don't want to evoke, and it suggests that, and I don't want to, I can't, for a variety of reasons, you know. I'll think shit out like that. That's very TI. Preparing for ontological assaults upon the time object by others is a very TI process where you understand, like, I want to make this, I don't want this to make mistakes. And that means avoiding all this other stuff, all this stuff. Whereas an NITE will view it as, I don't want to execute it improperly kind of mistakes. I don't want it to be messy. I don't want it to be not done right. The TIFE anything will go, I don't want to make anybody cringe, basically. And I want everybody to think it's cool. So I'm going to avoid everything that's not that. It's a really roundabout way of getting to it. I mean, it's a not roundabout, negative space way of getting to it. It's very counterintuitive if you were going to try to figure out how to understand things in life. But if you stick with it, if you're diligent with it, it can pay dividends in the long run because you end up becoming practiced at everything. You have to make every single mistake before you can eliminate it from your repertoire. It's weird. But you can eliminate it eventually. Okay, so socionics tells us that TE is very strong for the NTP. That makes perfect sense. But I think it's not just because of where it is, I think it's because it's a judging function, and it's our second. TI is our second. It's like our main judging function, TI. I think that the specific combination of any TI means that TE is going to be extra, extra strong because it's the possibilities and the consistency combined that necessitate one to understand the rules of concretization. On the F's, preciousness. Well, that's what ENTPs are going to understand very poorly. We understand which ones are concretely possible. We understand which ones are consistent. We understand all the possibilities. We're slow to understand the NI, but we do get it eventually. But we're slow to understand like why we shouldn't do that. Everything you're saying is true, but at the end of the day, we really shouldn't do that, and here's why. And it's one simple reason, and it's like, oh, okay. Or, and so we're slow into to acknowledging, because NI, ENTPs are slow at acknowledging certain parts about NI, because NI requires one to have some sort of link with FI as well, which is the preciousness path. And it says, how do I know which paths are precious to me? Uh, like, okay, Eric, you're in charge of thinking, looking at all the possible paths, and picking and making suggestions about which ones we should actually SE, which ones we should walk down, and then SI map. Because right now we're in the evaluatory phase. We're gonna see the possibilities. I want you to evaluate them for consistency and fairness, and that includes all concretization vectors, so we know whether we actually can concretize it or not. We'll have another TE person come in and do the actual concretization, but TI does pre-concretization better than TE, and bada bing, bada boom. And nobody remembers to include an INFJ to make sure that we didn't miss something important, right? TE doesn't even care, doesn't even check. They're just like, all right, let's execute the thing. This is a problem. If I've done my pre-TE right, TE doesn't vet shit for shit. So, there it goes. Right along the path. You forgot to put an INFJ in the evaluatory committee? Why? That's kind of dumb. Or an INTJ. Either way. You need an I in there. Because it turns out that path, uh, I forgot to factor in that's got lava dripping down on people. It would be something dumber than that. It would be like, I didn't factor in that there's a part of the path is enclosed around by rock walls, and the wagons can't fit through there. That would be the kind of mistake I'd put. Like, I just wouldn't notice the fact that the path got smaller there, and that it was. I just started thinking, yeah, that's still plenty big. People can fit through there. Horses can fit through there. I wouldn't think about the fact the wagons are actually like 6 inches too wide or something. It'd be that, right? And then the INTJ, INFJ would come in and say, are the wagons going to be able to fit through there? But and then we get down to the preciousness, though. The thing is, I was put in charge of this. It never occurred to me that I really, 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 really wanted to go on path C, because that was going to pass right by my mom's house, and I get to see her finally after not being away for 6 months. And it had only it didn't really have any major disadvantages. It just was kind of a boring path. It was kind of flat and didn't have any interesting features in it. So I just discarded it, because why? Its most interesting feature was that it was extremely precious to me, and I don't consider that in my thing until dead last. And it's almost nothing that will flummox me so much that I have to get to dead last. I'll have this shit solved with any TI most of the time. FE's lending a helping hand there, saying, yeah, okay, it's sort of logical, but that person's going to hate you forever. like Candace just telling me, nobody's going to be your friend if you smell bad, Eric. I said, I don't smell bad when I go out in places. I just don't feel like taking a shower. Are we going to have intercourse right now or something? No. Well, yeah, I don't feel like taking a shower. Anyway, I joke, I jest, I tell the truth, though. But regardless, what was I talking about? Cognitive functions and such. Then finally, after these processes occur, we get to S, E, and SI. So the thing to note is there's a natural order of operations, as far as I'm concerned. The natural order of operations goes for all of life. It goes NETI, NITE. No, it goes NETI, No. It goes NE. That's how it should go. Okay. NETIFIFENITESESI. That's how it should go. Okay, that's how it should go. NETIFIFETE. No, NITESESI. I'm gonna say it again. NETIFIFENITESESI. That's the order. So in other words, it goes possibilities, fairness, preciousness, popularity, idealness, execution, idealness, deal breakerness. It's a two folder. It gives you it's the final veto or go ahead. And then so okay, if I can start over, god damn. Possibilities, then fairness, then preciousness, then popularity, then idealness / deal breakeriness, then executioniness, then or concretization, and then walking, and then mapping. In that order. That's how it should go as order of operations of dealing with a life situation. If you have time, right? If there's time to do all that stuff, if you're trying to make a plan for something, it should go, okay, first let's talk about all the possible ways we could do it. Then let's make sure that, vet the ways to make sure they're at least legitimate. We don't want to, well, we could do it by this, by killing all those people. No, that's not going to work. TI is going to reject that right away. So FI would reject it too. If it gets past TI, it goes to FI. If FI says, I don't care whatever else is going on, I feel really fucking awful about this and I'm going to do it. So good. And then number 3, popularity. If it gets past FI, it should go to. All right, now even though this is fair, and even though I like it, everybody else seems to hate it, so it's never going to happen. So fuck it. But okay, fine. Everybody likes it. Then let's go to NI. But you guys forgot about this thing that's going to kill everybody. Thank you, NI. And then it goes to past NI too. Well, then it goes to how are you actually going to do it? Step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. TE. And then it goes to okay. Well, then what now? Well, do the steps. That's SE. And then it goes to what have we done so far, and where do we have to go ahead now? That's SI. And Eric has explained it for you. It's an analogy for you, from me, from all of us here at Talking with Famous People. Have a very, very, very exciting President's Day upcoming here. Martin Luther King Day, next holiday. It's going to be spectacular. I'm going to go make my Martin Luther King Day float right now. Right this second, Eric. Well, after I stop this.